Well, good morning. It is Sunday the 16th. And what's interesting about today is the fact that tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, which people have been celebrating right now for like days. Now, let's think about how we used to treat the Irish when they first got here back in the turn of the century. They were like the most vile people, according to folks. And now it's a liquor industry holiday. Same thing we did with Cinco de Mayo, right? With all the Hispanics. So let's enjoy the fact that the liquor industry is propping up our immigration policy, saying, let's be nice to the folks, at least let them help us sell liquor. We'll discuss that and more in today's rotation.
Oh, that's the video.
That's your cue, Carl.
That's the wrong video. I was just trying to figure out what you were talking about.
Well, I went to a street fair the other day. Everybody's in green. It's like the 14th, and everybody's drinking beer and just saying, "Hey, it's St. Patrick's Day. Let's celebrate the Irish." I said, "Yeah, let's first apologize to them for what the fuck we did to them about a century ago."
Well, there's that. Someone told me that St. Patrick's Day is like Freaknik or Calle Ocho for white people. So.
I'm surprised you know about Freaknik over in Atlanta, but that's not the scary part. Well, anyways, good morning. We are here. We are officially the masters of cannabis. My name is Gary Stein. I am the political director here for Suncoast Normal and our master of public health. I didn't hear the sound effect. We get the sound effect?
It's that I have my background music. Hold on.
This is why he's so good. And this is our the master of business administration, Carlos Angel Hermida.
Thank you.
Carlos, by the way, comes from a terrorist country, Cuba. And we're going to work on that one too. And above him, our deputy, our director and master of business administration, Christopher Cano.
No, not at all. Not at all, Gary.
What can I say? If Cuba is listed as a terrorist country, does that mean they're going to limit immigration?
I don't know, but Carlos is from Hialeah. I didn't know that was a terrorist country.
Oh, believe me, they're in Hialeah. It's very much a terrorist area. I see it on every corner.
Oh my goodness! You know what? You're right though, Gary. The current tone of everything is just going off the rails, and it's like we need some like sensibility, people who are logical in office. And I think that's a great segue into who our guest is today, is a voice of reason in the wilderness.
Absolutely. Now, you know that federal law usurps all state law. However, I think the federal law is so, okay, let's put it this way, fucked up right now, that I think it's better we concentrate on state law and see what we can't do at home, and then we'll try to fix the federal one. And in that vein, I know this guy since he was the legislative aide for the great Joe Saunders, who, by the way,
that's right.
Some of the best shoes in that office. I'm going to get into that another day. Carlos,
the best what? What did you say?
Our favorite Peruvian, Soldado de Verdad, and who has worked so hard for this industry from the very beginning. Carlos, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here on the rotation. Thank you. Thank you for all the applause. I appreciate that. Everybody. It's great to be here on the rotation. It's great to be here with you to discuss the 2025 session. And it's good to be back in the process. You know, folks know that, some may not know, many may not know that I was in the Florida House of Representatives for 6 years, representing East Orange County, elected to 3 two-year terms in the Florida House. And in this past election cycle in November, I was officially elected to the Florida Senate in the upper chamber, representing Senate District 17, which is most of Orange County in the Orlando area east of I-4. So I've just started a 4-year term in the Florida Senate in November, and I'm proud to serve the people of Florida. And it's good to be here on the show.
And it's great that you're wearing your normal pin. That is really impressive. If you ever want to have a good conversation in the supermarket, guys, wear that pin when you go to Winn-Dixie.
Exactly. Well, gives you a lot of questions.
Absolutely. In some cases, I have to gauge the situation, tell everybody it's a maple leaf, I'm actually Canadian. But even that's not working right now because obviously Canada is now our official enemy. But how is what's going on in the federal government affecting what's going on in session right now? Because there seems to be a conjunction right now is whether we can fight what's going on federally or not.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I would like to see that this legislative session is not as tied to what's happening in the federal government, because I actually want to help people. I want to help my constituents. I want to improve their lives. I want to lower the cost of everyday living, lower the cost of prescription drugs, lower the cost of property insurance. And if we focus on taking the cues from the federal government, we're not going to be doing that. Case in point, the lead up to the 2025 session, which began at the beginning of March, had Republicans fighting with each other in the Florida legislature, which we know is a Republican supermajority in both the Florida House and Senate. We know the current governor, Ron DeSantis, is a Republican as well. And so they control all levels of government, especially the legislature, the executive branch, and the judiciary, frankly, because of all of the Republican appointees that have been made over many years. And in the lead up to the legislative session, they admittedly took their cues from Donald Trump. They had 3 special legislative sessions to attack immigrants, to pass unconstitutional policy, to spend hundreds of millions of Florida's taxpayer dollars to expand the footprint of state government, to involve local law enforcement and state officials in federal immigration enforcement work, with no limits to where that would go, including in our schools, in our religious institutions, and our churches, and in ways that actually are going to harm the economy, because we have a major labor shortage in the state of Florida, which federal policy and state anti-immigrant policy is worsening. And of course, these things are directly related when we talk about rising prices, particularly grocery prices and immigration. You cannot have 2 things at the same time, in my opinion. Those 2 things being low grocery prices and deporting every person that folks perceive are not legally present in the United States. You can't have both of those things. We need to actually have comprehensive immigration reform. We need to be able to have a process that allows for many immigrants to legally work in this country and be a part of several industries, including the agriculture industry, where, by the way, they are regulated and treated fairly and humanely, so they are not put in substandard working conditions. But I digress. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's what happens. Yeah, when you're just taking a guide from the federal government and you're just implementing federal policy, we're not actually solving problems and addressing the real needs of Floridians.
Well, we have a situation right now where they're actually considering deporting people for free speech issues. The gentleman Mahmoud, who was taken out of his own was it dorm room or whatever it was at the time, and now what they're talking about, they want to inspect USF to see if quote unquote anti-Semitism is taking over. And I think it's more along the lines of see how we can get rid of more free speech and at USF. Now, I know you're a Golden Knight, and nobody ever has political discussions over it at UCF, right? But
well, I mean, college campuses are where young people in this country really begin to exercise their free speech rights and begin to find out who they are and explore differing ideas. Anti-Semitism is a real problem that needs to be addressed and needs to be tackled. But we also have free speech rights in this country. You can't detain and hold students and potentially even prepare them for deportation, which, by the way, I've seen in certain cases where people are being held in airports because they are on some list somewhere that they they spoke out at a rally or said something that was perceived to be anti-Israel and are being held. That's not the country that we were founded on. This is a country of free speech. We are particularly nicknamed the Free State of Florida. We have to mean it.
Well, the guy who actually penned that word oftentimes works very hard to remove those freedoms. But
yeah,
that's another thing altogether. I think the governor kind of got his head handed to him by the legislature in that special session where he took his budget, brought it in there, and they just kind of like ripped it apart and said, no, we're going to go with ours. And he was shocked because he wanted to have a special session just to pass his. So have they come to a meeting of the minds as far as that's concerned, so we can stop worrying about that particular issue? Because your one constitutional goal is to make that budget.
That's right. So just to kind of give everyone a recap, we know that oftentimes in Washington, D.C., we see that Congress is up there in session in Congress, if you will, almost year round. They have lots of recesses here and there throughout the year, but you pretty much can turn on the TV almost any time of year and see that members of Congress are fighting it out, duking it out in D.C. In Florida, we have a 60-day legislative session that is constitutionally mandated every calendar year, which means that we're really only in Tallahassee full time doing the people's business for 2 months. This year in 2025, that began at the beginning of March and goes through the beginning of May. And during that time, the only thing that we are required to do, to your point, Gary, is pass a balanced budget. That is the only thing that we are required to do before we leave. And what'll be interesting to watch, because since the governor years ago launched his presidential campaign and it collapsed in a spectacular way on the national stage to the point where he won exactly 0 counties in Iowa before he withdrew from the race. Since then, his political clout within the Republican Party and within the legislature has substantially diminished to the point where now Republican lawmakers in both the Florida House and Senate are finally willing to assert their independence as a legislature. They are finally willing to pursue an agenda that doesn't have anything to do with Ron DeSantis's political ambitions and Ron DeSantis's campaign for president of the United States, which, by the way, is what the last several years was. The last several legislative sessions was the Florida legislature just implementing anything that Governor DeSantis told them to do, to hell with actually solving real problems. You know, as property insurance is going through the roof, Florida had a specific and very localized in high inflation rates in our state compared to the rest of the state. We were called an inflation hotspot. The Florida legislature was very busy passing laws at that time to regulate pronouns in public schools, to pass laws to regulate drag shows and drag queens. They passed a Don't Say Gay or Trans law, and then when they were done with that, they didn't think that they took that quite far enough. They passed a expanded version of Don't Say Gay or Trans that went all the way to 12th grade rather than being limited to kindergarten through 3rd grade. You know, the list of absurd policies that they obsessed over and enacted into law during the period that Ron DeSantis had total control of the Florida legislature. It's embarrassing for our state that these were the things that the Republicans in charge focused on for many years. Now that they have been freed of that obligation to do anything that Governor DeSantis wants, now there's an opportunity in this legislative session to not only build a budget that addresses real problems and needs that we have in the state, but also to pass good policy. And I'm hopeful that we can do some of that. And to your point, in the budget, Gary, the legislature has shown, this Republican supermajority legislature has shown a willingness to use their power to override the governor's veto if they see fit, which they've already done once since the new year in a dramatic fashion, to override the governor's veto from last year. They reached all the way back to last year, and they just decided that they were going to override a veto related to legislative services and a budget related to how we run the Capitol and making sure that we have sufficient staff and sufficient resources within the legislature. I think it's a sign of things to come, hopefully.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that they actually teach the federal legislature how to live with a spine.
Well, Senator, I want to ask you, is this really what politics has become? We have to wait until the executive branch is a lame duck before our legislative branch, which is supposed to be the basis of all of our government representation, gains a spine and tells them to take a walk. I mean, you know, the first article of the Constitution is setting up the legislative branch. It's not the executive. And I mean, that's just shocking that's like the way you just outlined it. It's like, wow, these guys can't get a spine until either they can't hitch their political ambitions to someone else's wagon, or until there's no real recourse to have them removed, you know?
That's right. That's right. That's not how it's supposed to be, Chris, to your point. We are, as a legislature, a separate branch of government. You know, we have the legislature, we have the judicial branch, we have the executive branch. You know, those we each have constitutional powers and independent responsibilities as independent branches of government that are meant to be taken in tandem with one another. It was never meant for the executive branch to have total control and say over what's happening in the other branches. So it's refreshing to see that in this legislative session, we're going to see the legislature asserting its independence once again, and I hope that they do it more often.
Obviously, our goal is to move towards legalization of cannabis, but with all the other things going on right now, it makes it difficult to put that as a priority when all these other things have suddenly floated themselves up to become much more existential threats as far as policy is concerned. But one of the things you mentioned, the fact that you're here to do the people's work during the 60-day session.
Yes.
One of the things that we do as the people is we have citizen initiatives. Now, we have had actually things passed, getting past the threshold of having 1 million petitions, getting past the Supreme Court, only to have the thing voted on and then totally decimated by the legislature. But now they went one step further. They had a fetal pig issue, and they had to buck it up to 60%. And now it's practically impossible, even with the majority, to pass something like Amendment 3, we were just talking about just before the show, where we had 54%, and that wasn't enough. And you actually have a bill to change that. What is the temperature as far as how that's going to go forward to get it back to 50%?
Sure. Well, just to let your viewers and listeners know, I filed SJR 864 to reinstate the 50% threshold required to pass constitutional amendment. And I say resolution. And I say reinstate it, because we had a simple majority required in Florida before to pass constitutional amendments until the legislature decided to make it harder. A couple decades ago, they put a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and unfortunately, voters in Florida, a simple majority of them said, yes, we want to raise the threshold to 60% instead of 50. But Florida voters did that years and years and years ago. But the irony here is that approximately 56% of Florida voters voted yes to raise the threshold from 50% to 60% required to change the Constitution, which didn't meet their own standard. And so now here we are. We're stuck with the 60% requirement, which makes it extremely difficult to pass constitutional amendments, not in and of itself, but because now there have been so many additional obstacles that have been placed on citizen-led ballot initiatives, citizen-led amendments that make it harder to collect petitions, that raise the threshold for how we collect petitions for ballot initiatives in the state, that make it substantially more expensive, that have abbreviated the length of time that folks have to collect those petitions. There's just been so much red tape that's been imposed on the citizen-led amendment process in the lead up to Amendment 3 and 4, which of course we know were sabotaged by taxpayer resources, and Governor DeSantis illegally used taxpayer resources to run propaganda campaigns against both Amendment 3 and 4 via public service announcements, via threats to TV executives that if they didn't pull pro Amendment 4 TV ads, for example, that they would be criminally prosecuted.
And you have
all of these things are illegal, by the way. This is what Amendments 3 and 4 had to contend with in the 2024 session.
And you've got two bills actually to address the things you were just talking about. The first one is to prevent anybody from threatening a media company from being able to post public service ads, which is essentially what these are, and to stop the taxpayer use of the state government for creating ads with misinformation to basically affect the vote in regards to citizen initiatives, right?
That's right. Senate Bill 926, which I've introduced in the Florida Senate, is the Public Resource Election Neutrality Act. This bill basically says that you cannot run PSAs that are even remotely related to constitutional amendments using taxpayer resources during the election cycle where that constitutional amendment is on the ballot. Why? Because even when asked, when the governor's office was called out for using taxpayer funds to run public service announcements that were against the cannabis legalization Amendment 3 and that were against the Amendment 4 that would have overturned the state's 6-week extreme abortion ban, even when asked about those PSAs, he would say, oh, this has nothing to do with Amendment 3. This has nothing to do with Amendment 4. We're just putting a public service announcement out there to let people know there are harms directly related to cannabis use, that that there's misinformation out there about our abortion laws. Of course, it had everything to do with Amendments 3 and 4. So we have that legislation, and while we know it's going to be a tall order for us to get the exact language that we have introduced in this bill, we already have an ally in Senator Jennifer Bradley, who has introduced similar language through an amendment that was added to a bill earlier this week that would restrict taxpayer funds being used in favor or against a constitutional amendment, which I support.
I just wanted to add on to this. The PSAs that the DeSantis administration has put out are not great. I miss the old school PSAs, the anti-weed ads. Carlos, I think we have an old one up there that used to go around in the early 2000s. It pull it up. Yeah, I miss this type of anti-weed PSA. This was the type of anti-weed PSA that made me think, who is her plug and where can I get some of that?
I want some of that.
I think I went out with her in high school. I'm just saying, she looks very familiar. She had kind of a flat effect.
Wow.
That and so many more. I mean, I actually do miss the frying pan and the egg thing too. but eggs are so expensive you can't run that ad anymore.
I missed the Ninja Turtles who clearly had the munchies telling me not to smoke weed. Yeah.
Eating pizza all day long.
Well, I got to admit that they did their homework when it came to creating those ads that were against Amendment 3. They saw every single thing that was splitting apart the cannabis industry, as far as the voters are concerned, as what their concerns were, like no home grow, and the fact that True Leave, which is a oligopoly in and of itself, it was basically pushing it. And they threw those ads out there saying, this is what you're voting for. This is why you need to vote against it. So they understood that. And the good thing is, again, if we can get it into committee and get it to go forward, you've got the bill that I want to talk about is 1390, which basically addresses those things and saying you can have legalization with horizontal licenses, so you can cultivate things of that sort, and you can have home grow, and you can have adult legalization. Let's talk about the genesis of that bill.
Sure. Well, so I've introduced Senate Bill 1390. Which legalizes cannabis in Florida for adult use. It takes down vertical integration and allows for small businesses to enter the legal cannabis market, to take out a license to be just a grower or just a distributor or just a retailer. You would no longer be required, as we currently require the medical cannabis industry, to be vertically integrated to provide cannabis from seed to sale, which of course has a tremendous cost associated with it, and keeps small businesses out of the market because of the amount of resources, bonds, and collateral that is required to be a medical marijuana treatment center in the state of Florida. So we're allowing in this bill not only legal weed, but we are also allowing for small businesses to enter the market and not allowing cannabis monopolies to continue in perpetuity. We are also creating a home grow program that includes co-op programs as well, so that individuals can engage in home grow through a public co-op, a community co-op. Sometimes you don't have all of the resources and the supplies that you need to really grow cannabis at home. And so co-op programs are always really good to help people kind of learn how to grow cannabis trees, kind of do it together as part of a community, have access to resources where, they can cultivate their own plants. So, those are the basics around this bill, which you had up on your screen, Senate Bill 1390. And what is the genesis of this bill? Well, this is nearly identical to legislation that I filed for many years as a member of the Florida House. It was a bipartisan bill that I introduced with then Republican Senator Jeff Brandes. I believe the years that I introduced that were 2021 and 2022. It also allows for expungement of nonviolent cannabis crimes in here as well. So there's a lot of details here in the bill. We don't tackle hemp in the legislation, because I think that is something that obviously needs to be addressed as well. But this is a legalization bill that I feel like folks can really get behind. It doesn't mean that it has every single policy detail and every provision that we would like to see, but it is certainly a starting point. And even when I say that, we don't fully flesh out in the bill what the details are of the home grow program. We put out what the concepts are and allow for DACs to flesh out what those details would be. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we have home grow. We are allowing for small businesses to enter the market. We are putting restrictions on public smoking, because that's something that is very important, with caveats. And so this is the type of bill, the type of legalization bill that can pass in a red state like Florida without selling out and leaving lots of people behind, in my humble opinion.
Senator, I'm glad you said that, because I mean that's been a lot of the criticism from the grassroots, and that was that was the nerve that the DeSantis administration pressed in the last election. They knew that it was trending right at 60%, so they ran the focus groups. They found the nerve that they needed to press on to get folks to vote against legalization, to continue the status quo of arresting people with felony charges for less than an ounce. And here we are today. You know, you're championing this bill. Carlos just dropped an action alert link. So those who are streaming now, you can click that link, and Normal will automatically generate an email to your legislators and Governor DeSantis asking them to support this bill. We want to continue to get that going. So, folks, please click that link and support Senator Smith's bill. You know, in regards to legalization, in regards to the home grows and such, I think the co-op idea is fantastic. I can tell you, every time I've attempted to grow, it has always ended in failure. So having someone who has expertise that I can share with, that can provide safe and reliable medicine, and that's really what people want. They want the peace of mind that the medicine they're purchasing is both safe for them and that they can trust it. And much in the same way, people want to have home gardens and know what they grow, because we live in an era where oftentimes we can't even trust the food that we eat, the chemicals that we're consuming, because of the interest of money in politics, right? And I think that is no different in the cannabis industry than it is any other industry that we have. And I think folks deserve the opportunity to want to be able to know what they're putting in their body and grow it at home, because what we see is in other states and across the country, there are lawsuits against these major multi-state operators, especially the ones based here in Florida, of bribing and influencing, unduly lab results, putting out stuff that's not really true. Gary harps on all the time the miseducation and the lack of expertise of the folks in the front office of your experience when you walk into a dispensary in Florida. I mean, there's a lot to be said. And then we have people like Carlos, who is operating a hemp business, doing it right by all the regulations. And then every single year we see the legislature get bogged down and want to put this man out of business. And this bill that you have would essentially allow someone like himself, who's been a good operator, the opportunity to operate in the cannabis space. And my son agrees 100%.
Yeah, you wanted Carlos to just talking up a storm there. But
true.
But Carlos, I mean, you're a small business owner. I want you to chime in, man. What do you think about this bill? What do you think about it as an opportunity for you to get in the industry like you've always wanted?
I mean, there's so much bullshit that has sprouted up over the past, how long has it been now? 10 years?
Right.
We've been trying to legalize just so like people can like get into the industry, right? And they still haven't let me get into the industry. If I was able to, take all of my hemp stores, my two hemp stores, and change them into dispensaries, I'd do that in a heartbeat. That is ultimately the goal. So I appreciate you working, Senator Smith, for working to help us get into the industry. I really, would love the opportunity just to be able to help somebody with cannabis,
And Carlos, you're in the bubble. We're outside of the bubble. So we have to figure out what the temperature of Tallahassee is based on various factors. Usually one of the first things I notice is what bill gets heard first. And the first bill that was heard this year was Colleen Burton's hemp bill. After they had a huge committee meeting, went on for like 3 days on the hemp and things of that sort. I think just in part to remove the veto that was done on that DeSantis did last year in regards to the hemp bill they tried doing last year. But then again, I kind of figured that was only a one year thing. He took the lobbyist money and said, "Yeah, we'll go ahead and veto this, but next year, watch out." And is that what's going on right now? Do we see a big move to do a draconian hemp bill that's going to be moving forward?
Well, that's going to be really hard, because if the same forces that brought us the anti-hemp legislation last year run the same bill, they're gonna run into two problems now. First, a veto from the governor, because if it's identical to the previous year or very similar, he's just going to veto it again. Regardless of what his motives are. His motives showing the hemp bill are not good and true. Okay. He did that on purpose so that he could get the hemp industry on his side in opposition to Amendment 3.
Right.
He could get commitments from the hemp industry executives, the big ones, to be able to contribute towards his effort to undermine Amendment 3 in exchange for his veto. The second major problem that we would have with a nearly identical anti-hemp bill is that we don't have the votes to override the governor's veto. We have the willingness of a legislature to override the governor's veto, finally. But just because you have the willingness doesn't mean you have the votes. In the Senate, for some reason, that hemp bill last year passed unanimously. I wasn't here when that happened. Can't. I would have voted the hemp bill just to be unequivocally clear on where I stand, but I was not a senator at that time when it passed unanimously. In the House, it only passed with like 68 or 69 votes out of 120, which by the way, if that holds anywhere near that, they don't have the votes to override a governor's veto to make the bill pass anyway. So those are two major obstacles to the hemp bill, which is why if it is going to move this year, which by the way, I want to be clear, I do think that there's a need for us to have a legislation that regulates the hemp industry, just like any other industry from the state, not just federally via the farm bill. But this bill that passed last year ain't it. That ain't it. That's not the hemp bill that we need. So,
well, from what I understand about Burden's new bill is that it's actually stricter. Like there's stuff in there about you're not allowed to write the word hemp on the side of your building. You can't see it from the sidewalk or the street. And then there's also it definitely seems like alcohol companies are now lobbying towards this hemp bill, because now it's saying only hemp only bars and liquor stores can sell hemp drinks.
Well, Carlos, that's a good point, because Total Wine and Spirits just picked up both True Leave and True Leave and Juana's hemp drink lines. So now you'll be able to buy infused hemp alcohol, essentially, in the hemp beverages at Total Wine and Spirits.
Really?
Yeah. So
shocker. I can get hoppy beers at Total Wine and Beer, It's something that's a real good IPA with a lot of hops in it, which is close to as you can get to cannabis without actually being cannabis. But now,
Carlos, is that something that you can produce as well? A hemp infused beer of some kind?
No, but we sell hemp drinks. We sell hemp sodas here in our store.
Carlos, I think you'll have to pick up a liquor license, right, or a beer and wine license. To sell
of course.
Yeah. So there's that.
Of course.
Yeah, just to confuse people. That's just the way it goes.
Now, well, Senator, you mentioned something about your bill that I thought was interesting as well, is that you really leave it up to FDACs to kind of do the whole public comment period and make the regulations around home grow, which is really the exact opposite of what we see in Senator Gruder's version of his home grow and his bill, which essentially makes the government come into your house and inspect your home before you can start growing, which is ludicrous as a fiscal note. And second, they don't even have the inspectors to inspect every business that's operating in Florida right now, let alone 900,000 patients.
So let me be honest and transparent. As a senator, I am allowed to file an unlimited number of bills, which is a double-edged sword. It's great as a former member of the House because I was limited. I was only allowed to file 7 bills as a state representative. Now, as a state senator, I'm unlimited. But it's be careful what you wish for, because now, as a freshman senator, I ran into a unique challenge, which was that, well, maybe not so unique, which was that I had so many bills. I ultimately filed 34, which is not that many in the grand scheme of things, but it was a lot more than I was used to. And as a result, there were some bills that I filed that I really wanted to develop further, and intended to flesh them out more fully than I did, but I ran out of time because there was a bill filing deadline. So I want to be transparent with you and let you know that the only reason we really delegated the creation of the home grow program to DACs, including the co-op in our bill, is because I needed to put a placeholder in there, because that's really not the policy that I really would not like to leave it in DAC's hands, because I don't, full respect to Commissioner Simpson, I don't trust DACs to do this. So in the next legislative session, I'd like to introduce a revised version of this bill that includes input from the stakeholders and from the advocates that can fully expand on this idea of home grow, that doesn't just give it all to DACs. Now, you mentioned Senator Gruters, and I want to first applaud Senator Gruters for his leadership, and here's why. It takes courage in the Republican Party to be pro-cannabis, which Senator Gruters is. He supports our freedom to use cannabis as individuals, and he's going about it a different way than I would, but ultimately we have the same goal. We can credit Senator Gruters with bringing President Trump along in also saying that he supported Amendment 3 in Florida. Sadly, that was not enough. I welcome that support when that announcement was made. Sadly, it wasn't enough, but I want to applaud Senator Gruters' leadership on cannabis. Now, with that being said, you know, the legislation that he brought forward has some issues. I don't think that where we need to be as a state once we do legalize home grow is that people would be limited and restricted to having 2 plants in a closet somewhere out of view,
including by binoculars. I love that they actually included the fact that you can't see inside the grow with binoculars.
Well, I got to say, Gary and Senator, you know, these are the type of political discussions we want to see between Democrats and Republicans. It's, you know, how are you going to grow your weed? Like, you know, not what we're seeing right now uplifted on the national stage, right? Like, Carlos, you're the apolitical person who's become political. You know, how do you feel about, having 2 senators finally having a discussion of, well, what's the best way we should grow weed in Florida?
I would prefer not to.
I like Senator Gruder. We had him on the show not too long ago. I know that he's very friendly with the True Leave lobbyists. I'm going to put it at that point, and just realize that there are sometimes some other motivation on his part. In the fact that maybe that his home grow bill is distasteful enough to make it not want to go forward, and therefore give people back to the MMTCs that are currently making so much money. And yet we have a broken system right now. We finally got 22 new licenses that all got memorandums of understanding right now. And from what I understand, a good majority of those licenses are already up for sale, which just goes to show you the mindset of the people who have been putting in. They don't want to actually do the work. They want to create this as a cash cow for themselves. And I see more MSOs coming in the current system. If we don't change that, we won't have a situation. Now, I know that, Carlos, you must be thrilled to death that you're no longer yelling from the back of the house. And you actually have a seat somewhat closer to the well because you're in the Senate as opposed to the House. But right now, the majority has a super duper majority. It is beyond a super majority. And we even had 2 Democrats, one from a Hispanic district, which I'm really upset about, that actually went to the other party, despite the fact that they had a severely blue district, and then yet another one as well who had her own reasons, I would suppose. But it must make things difficult when you realize that your minority is so slim that if you don't go bipartisan, you can't get anything done. Is that basically the situation?
That's true. I mean, listen, we have to stand up for what we believe in. I was elected by my constituents to stand up for freedom and equality for everyone. There are certain things that are just going to be non-negotiable for me. But what we also have to understand is, we have to operate in the environment where we are. We have to meet people where they are as well. And I don't see cannabis policy as being one that suddenly overnight with one single political victory, it's going to change everything about cannabis policy in the state. I think our progress is going to be very incremental if we're going to make it. That's just because I'm just reading the tea leaves, I'm reading the facts, and I'm looking at our own current situation to reach that conclusion. So I don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good on cannabis policy, but there are going to be some non-negotiables as part of that conversation.
Is there any animus to move cannabis legislation forward? We were able to get a lot of bills filed this year, including an employee protection bill and a protection of parental rights bill that is now filed and waiting for committee. And I'd like to see more of those things move forward. The question is, every year we see 2,000 bills filed, and about 200 or so get passed all the way through. So that's kind of a bad percentage in the first place. Do you see cannabis bills moving forward this session?
I think it's going to be very challenging to get them through this legislative session, which is frustrating because look at what just happened. Mm-hmm. Almost 57% of Floridians said they wanted legal cannabis. And we could probably add several more percentage points to that if we include those who didn't think Amendment 3 went far enough to get to a clear over 60% vast majority of Floridians. So we have been handed a mandate. Even though Amendment 3 and 4 failed to pass, we have been given a mandate by voters that they want us to address this issue and move forward with cannabis legalization. I think it's important for people to understand that the argument was very clearly made in 2024 that we need legal weed, that we need to allow small businesses in the industry, and we need to make sure that we have home grow. So if that is the message that was sent, let's do those things. Let's do those things. But we're going to have a really hard time doing that, and here's why. The folks who funded the anti-True Leaf message, the anti-cannabis monopoly message, the folks who funded the attacks that pointed out that home grow was not included in Amendment 3. It wasn't prohibited. Let's be clear. We could be having a conversation right now if Amendment 3 had passed about moving a bill through the process to also legalize home grow. That was allowed under Amendment 3. Lawmakers had the choice. It was not banned. It just was not discussed and addressed in Amendment 3. There's a difference. Those individuals who pushed that anti-Amendment 3 propaganda, they are prohibitionists. They are prohibitionist, conservative, moneyed and Republican interests who, now that they have succeeded in defeating Amendment 3, are sitting back and saying, my work is done here. I didn't want legal weed in Florida. I exploited the differences that folks had in their perception of what Amendment 3 was. And now I'm under no obligation to move any pro-cannabis policy forward. That's the environment we are in right now. Because, when they said this should not be a constitutional amendment, this is something that should be legislatively done, they were lying, because myself and Senator Brandis and many others introduced legislation to do just that for years before we had a constitutional amendment. The reason we had an amendment is because the legislature refused to consider our legislation. When they said Amendment 3 would ban home grow in the state of Florida forever and for all time, they were lying. Amendment 3 was just silent on home grow. It didn't prohibit it and it didn't ban it. When they said that this is just a handout to big cannabis corporations, they were also lying, because all Amendment 3 did was it continued the current medical cannabis industry vertically integrated framework that those prohibitionists created themselves in Florida law, and can decide to change it whenever they want.
Well, that's one of the reasons I didn't like the new version of the petition that came out that's from Smart and Safe Florida, is they moved into the ballot language the fact that this bill does not prohibit the legislature from creating bills that involve home grow. Well, it was always there, but they moved it forward like this bill automatically creates home grow, but it doesn't.
Well, Gary, I don't like the new initiative because it's putting a ban on smoking in the Constitution. I think that's a regulatory thing. I think that's a statutory thing that the legislature should decide. But I do not think it's something that we should be, just put it in our Constitution like that. And it's really got me at a crossroads of whether or not we'll be supporting it this go round.
Now, like we talk about our current enemy, Canada, they actually have in their language that the same thing that applies with smoking in regards to like a Clean Air Act, where you can only be in certain areas wherever you can smoke cigarettes. Basically, you can smoke cannabis. That's the way it is in Canada, because I think people don't necessarily walk down the street when it's like 20 below zero in Toronto.
But you're always going to have somebody bitching about something. Okay, we see this in New York City already. About people wanting to walk down the street to their grocery store, and even though they support the legalization of cannabis, they don't want to smell it on the streets because it's so gross. And Carlos, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been sitting here the entire show just kind of fidgeting in my chair. And here's the thing. I've been trying to think of a good question to ask you, and I know Kano's called on me twice already to say something. And here's the thing. I'm more than frustrated. I've looked at the date several times in this interview, right? It's 2025, right? We started this medical cannabis journey, this like the first real step, the United for Care first real step, started with an initiative for 2024. We legalized medical marijuana. Technically, next year it's going to be 10 years since we legalized medical marijuana. We're talking about step by step. But I was bitching about going step by step back then. I was complaining about how we needed to take these baby steps and how we needed to appease these conservatives. And, I honestly, I still don't have a good question for you. I'm just sitting here frustrated. I'm wondering what the fuck happened.
Me too.
There was a point in time 10 years ago, and, you've been in politics for a long time. I followed your political career. You've been a whatever nice thing I could say, a light of truth in this crazy political system for some time. So I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can forego the baby steps? Like, how can we get Floridian voters to really realize what they're voting for? As somebody who has been an activist, right? I don't really want to be an activist. My career has forced me into this. Okay. As much as I love you and your political career, Carlos, I really don't want to follow it. To be completely honest,
I don't want you to have to know who all your politicians are, because if you follow that closely, it's because we got real problems.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. Like, I go up to Tallahassee these past couple of years to look at the hemp bill, and I've seen Republicans doing nothing but trying to prohibit, trying to repeal our free speech. I've seen liberals up there trying to stand up for small business, trying to help out people and the actual people. It's crazy to me. I 100% believe that most of the people that vote Republican in the state of Florida, if they actually paid attention, not paid attention to what politicians were saying, but paid attention to the bills that they put forward and the way they use their vote, they'd realize that they're voting for the wrong people. I 100% believe that. I 100%, there was, I remember my parents I bring up my parents a lot because, conservative Cuban parents. But my parents were like looking at, a Florida channel thing, and they wanted to see their baby give public comment during some sort of, whatever thing.
You subjected them to the Florida channel. Wow.
And they were like, who are these Democrats up there? I really liked what they were saying. They were talking about free speech, and they were talking about small business and that we can't do this to small business. And I what is going on? What is fucking going on? I'm sure you're frustrated with this every single day, but what is going on? How can we fucking fix this shit?
That's right. That's right.
I'm sorry. I went off there. I'll shut up for the rest of this.
I think all Dems need to be populists on the issue of cannabis freedom in Florida. Look, it was considered bold in 2015 and 2016, the first time I ran for public office, when I ran for the Florida House of Representatives. It was considered bold for me to be going out there saying that we need to fully decriminalize cannabis in the state of Florida. I wasn't even using legalization language. I was just saying fully decriminalize. And I introduced legislation, when I was a freshman, to do that. But people were like, oh my God, I can't believe Carlos is out there talking about weed. He's such a, that's such a liberal cause. And I'm just like, but like the vast majority of my constituents are in support of this. I'm just responding to what people are saying on the ground. Of course, my advocacy evolved eventually to, full legalization pretty quickly when I realized that there wasn't enough leadership in the political cannabis space in Florida. And so I kind of stepped into that, really because like no one else was advocating for it. And so now, as far as what is the solution, I think people need to, as they are single issue voters on a lot of things, people are single issue voters on guns, they're single issue voters on abortion, they're single issue voters on immigration. Maybe they should be single issue voters on cannabis, and they should only support politicians from either party who support cannabis freedom in Florida. Because you can't call Florida a free state. You can't beat your chest and say, oh, here we are in the free state of Florida, and then do everything you can and use all of your resources to suffocate that freedom as it relates to cannabis and many other things.
But the message has become so what's the right word here? I think convoluted is probably the right word. And you were talking about this before, and I'll put this comment up on the screen as an example of what you were saying before. Legalize it in Florida, no home grow, then it's a no-go. So, you were saying before, the prohibitionists were putting out information that was like, if you want to be pro-cannabis, you want to knock down this legalized cannabis.
Right. If you want to be
like, I chuckle saying it,
And now here we are with nothing. We could be having, so pro-cannabis, we have nothing. We could be having a conversation right now. We could be having a conversation about home grow and what it looks like in Florida, and the need to have a comprehensive home grow program in the state had Amendment 3 passed. We could be having a conversation about taking down vertical right now for the 2025 session, because it would have been a part of the implementation of Amendment 3. No question. And we're having that conversation now just as a hypothetical if some of these bills that we introduce get passed. But it's not just visionary. We have cannabis legalization in our future. The question is how long do we want to wait? Do we want to? I don't think that the next ballot initiative is perfect either. But Do we want to cast that one aside too? And then, it's just it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and we got some comments coming in here, and I want to say the ganja leaks accusing the senator of voting to make CBD a felony. Senator, please address that, because I think ganja leaks needs to go fuck themselves for saying some bullshit.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry. I didn't
this bullshit comment that came up on YouTube just now from this fake ass page that thinks they're anonymous or something.
Yeah, basically they're saying that you voted to make CBD a felony.
Yeah, what are these guys, Republicans, trying to smear you? I don't get it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm just going into the comments. I didn't see how I could access. I don't know what they mean by making CBD. I think
they're talking about the vote on the hemp bill last year when you were not back in the.
So
when you were not in the House that session.
You addressed it already.
Let me assume the
you
best.
Don't need to go back.
Let me assume the best intentions here. I am Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith. There is an individual in the Florida legislature who exists. His name is Representative David Smith. He's been in the Florida House for many years. We are not the same person. I want to assume the best intentions. I've never had an opportunity to vote on the hemp bill because I was not a member of the Florida House or Senate when that bill came through.
Thank you. These guys are full of shit.
Representative Smith did. That is a different person. We are separate human beings. We're not the same person. I also see some comments from Dr. Gordon about making sure that we protect medical. Agreed. I want to make sure that we are in a place that when we do legalize cannabis, that we're not effectively or by default eliminating the medical program, because we're not. Because I believe in the medical program. I think that it needs to continue. And I know that a lot of people will continue to gain from making sure that we have a robust medical program, as we do in other states as well. We have a simultaneous legal program and a medical program at the same time. And that's why in my legislation that we introduced to legalize cannabis, we keep the medical program going forward. Well, what would the incentive be for folks to stay in the medical program if it's now legal? Well, I mean, the products will be tax-free. That's a major incentive. And you're going to continue to get real medical consultation from professionals on how to continue to use this product to obviously address the varying medical conditions that people are using cannabis to try to address or alleviate. You can't get that from a traditional retail storefront person in just a legal setting, a recreational setting.
Now you also put out another bill. I had brought to you a bill that would increase the number of qualifying conditions, and you picked out something that you actually worked on years ago, and that is trying to include opioid dependency as a qualifying condition, which is really important because of the fact that we currently have an issue where cannabis is banned in rehab facilities. And yet we have research going back to the 1880s where they used to use it for what is called opioid poisoning and help people get off of opioids at that time using cannabis. And so I think that strengthens the medical program to include things like that, to give it more credibility in the medical community.
Agreed. Look, for many years, including when I was in the Florida House of Representatives, there was a time where there were two Smiths in the Florida House, by the way. I was referred to Representative C. Smith, and there was also Representative D. Smith happening at the same time. In the Florida House and now in the Senate, through Senate Bill 778, I've introduced legislation to add a qualifying condition to the medical program, which is addiction to or dependency on opioids. We know, based on research and based on the facts, that folks that are addicted to prescription pain medication have been able to successfully wean themselves off of prescription pain meds through medical cannabis. It's just a fact. It doesn't mean it's going to work for every person, but we have to operate in the real world, where, hey, like sometimes it is choosing between the lesser of two evils, if you will. I'm not trying to smear cannabis use as an evil either. There are pros and cons, and everything should be used in moderation. But I do know that folks can wean themselves off of prescription pain meds, which are lethal, which can kill you. How many stories do we need to hear about folks that died from prescription painkillers? Weaning them off of that through medical cannabis, I think, is policy we need to explore.
In 2019, I tried to get Ashley Moody to put together a conference on what we could possibly do to alleviate opioid dependency in Florida. And she was open to that, but she was not open to the idea of cannabis being used. She was pushing more into education and more Narcan availability. Now, Narcan, for all of its goodness, and it does fix an acute situation, is like putting gauze on a massive head wound. It does not stop the fact that you're still going to have your brain breathing out at all times. You will just possibly overdose the following day. And then we need to get something that actually does work as far as long-term use. And I'm looking forward to seeing this go forward so we can actually have that discussion on opioid dependency and cannabis as a legitimate way of getting off that medication, getting off opioids.
Agreed.
The next chapter in our pill mill story here in Florida.
Well, Senator, thank you for coming on the rotation today. You're always welcome as a guest. I mean, you have been a champion from the get-go. We appreciate what you said earlier in the show. We wish we had you in the Senate last year when this whole hemp ban came about. We know you would have been the one no vote against it. And you've always been willing to stand up and be for right and what's true, regardless of how small of a minority, even if you're a minority of one. So let folks see, exactly what, where they can support you and how they can follow you along.
Yeah, please. And thank you, Chris. Thanks to everyone here, to Gary, to Carlos, to Chris, and to everyone who's listening or watching. You can keep tabs on me on social media. I'm on all of the Twitters and the IGs, and I still need to get on Blue Sky, though, admittedly. At Carlos G. Smith is where you can find me pretty much everywhere on social media. And we're doing what we can to keep everyone updated on how session moves along. Definitely hearing concerns, certainly about the bad, which again is going to be, unfortunately, probably the bad hemp bill by Senator Burton. Although I haven't had a chance to read through all of it, Gary's already telling me that it's actually more, even more extreme and more strict than the previous year. And if that is true, then I'm in opposition to that bill. Certainly. So, we'll be tracking that and seeing how that moves along, because we want to make sure that we're advocating for policy that is in the best interest of all Floridians. And so keep tabs on me at Carlos G. Smith on all the social medias. You can watch me on the Florida channel as well if you're so inclined to torture yourself in that way. And you can reach out to me at smith.carlos@flsenate.gov. And I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with the cannabis community. And I'm really grateful that the rotation reached out to me and invited me to join this discussion today.
Well, we appreciate you. Welcome anytime.
We do have an event coming up April 12th that we wanted to make you aware of, so maybe you and Jerick could come on by and get a chance to talk to the cannabis community, who will be there hopefully in droves, or at least in cars.
Well, he'll still be in session, Gary, so I don't think the Senate will be able to make it to our event. But
that's right. April 12th is still that 60 days.
Yeah. He'll be in Tallahassee. But we appreciate, and it's a standing invite to any normal event for you, Senator. We'd love to have you anytime.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.
Well, we'll see you in the Big T.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think it's time to do the news. All right. right. Well, coming up at the top of the news hour, and I think it's important to realize that for all the progress that we've made in Florida and all the progress we might make at the state level, there are still powers that be in the various states that want to roll things back. For example, in Idaho, there are state lawmakers that have approved a resolution that's asking voters to provide legislators with the exclusive authority to amend state laws specific to the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana and other controlled substances. So out of the state of Idaho, they just passed House Joint Resolution 4 along party lines. Basically, the Republicans in Idaho are going to have the folks vote on a ballot question next year that will amend their Article 3 of their state constitution that allows only the legislature to have the power and authority to legalize growing, producing, manufacturing, transporting, selling, delivering, dispensing, administering, prescribing, distributing, possession, and using marijuana, narcotics, or other psychoactive substances. And it only needs a simple majority to pass. So much in the same way we're talking about initiatives in Florida, Idaho really is the last bastion of prohibition in this country, and we see that they're going hard. So, hey, that's where we're at right now. Now, looking at some positive news in Colorado, lawmakers have shelved a proposal to impose a 10% THC potency cap on adult use cannabis products. Members of the Senate Business, Labor, and Technology Committee voted unanimously to reject the bill after its sponsors acknowledged they had received significant pushback from both constituencies and businesses. Senate Bill 76 would have prohibited the sale of cannabis products with more than 10% THC to those ages 21 to 25, and it further sought to impose new restrictions on the amount of THC per serving and per package for all consumers. I want y'all to know that the powers that be, the prohibitionists, are well funded. So these are going to be boilerplate bills in other states. And while they might not have got it through in Colorado, don't be shocked if we see these same bills pop up in Florida and other places across the country. Now, let's jump into some medical news. A recent survey data that was compiled by YouGov says that adults say alcohol poses greater risk to your health than marijuana. By nearly 3-to-1 margin, U.S. adults say that alcohol consumption poses a greater health risk to people than does the daily use of marijuana. Shocker there, right? I mean, I don't even want to delve into it more than that. We just keep moving on and let's look at how folks are seeing. Now, let's look at some other survey data that's been recently published in the journal Global Advances in Integrative Medicine and Health. And it says that nearly half of military veterans are using cannabis for pain relief. A team of investigators affiliated with the University of California at San Francisco and Yale University surveyed pain patients enrolled in the VA's primary care services program, and 40% of respondents acknowledged using cannabis to manage their symptoms. However, the study's authors suggested that this percentage may reflect an underreporting because cannabis use is, of course, discouraged within the VA, and respondents are more likely to report using cannabis to manage pain or mobility. 81% said that. And then 62% use it for sleep, 43% for PTSD and anxiety, 43% for stress, and 29% for depression. I mean, this all indicates that veterans frequently consume cannabis to improve their health-related quality of life. And I think it's vitally important that we continue to support our veterans communities, which is why for Suncoast Normal events, veterans do get in free. Show us your card or your DD-214. Let us know you served. And, of course, you get free general admission to all of our events. Look, I think it's vitally important that we understand that things, when Carlos talked about baby steps earlier in policy, is that these things get addressed. In North Dakota, for example, members of both the House and the Senate are passed competing bills through their respective chambers that provide for the use of cannabinoid edible products by qualified medical patients. Under the current law, state registered patients can only have herbal cannabis or infused tinctures, capsules, or tropical patches, which is kind of different from Florida, because when we first legalized medical, you could only have edibles or the tinctures and capsules, and then Ron DeSantis had to sign an executive order allowing for, essentially herbal cannabis, which is interesting because we never actually codified that in the law. It's an executive order. So if another governor came behind them and decided to rescind that, that's an interesting thing for the legislature is going to have to address in regards to herbal cannabis in Florida. So just wanted to point that out there. Executive orders are not the law, and that we really do need the legislature to address a lot of these things. Now, the most important thing that I think, and it's a topic that got really heated today in the conversation, is around hemp-derived products. And a recent analysis that came out of San Diego and the Imperial County's Joint Labor Management Cannabis Committee showed that most hemp-derived intoxicating products sold online are actually contain synthetically produced cannabinoids. They looked at novel cannabinoids like THCP and HHC, according to analysis of 104 products. And as you can see from my son, he wants me to wrap up the news. So, Carlos, Gary, I will let you all go ahead and talk a little bit about the best blunt in the Bay. But before we do that, I want y'all to, if you're a lawyer, if you're someone in the legal community, December 4th through the 6th in Key West, Florida, Normal will be having its annual legal seminar, which we've been doing for close to 40 years now, at the Hyatt Centric Key West Resort and Spa. You can visit normal.org and sign up to register for the National Legal Seminar and get you some credits as well if you need your education credits.
I don't speak Spanish too well, but I do speak baby. I think he wants a croqueta. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, he doesn't eat fried foods, Gary. This baby is fed 100% organic grass-fed beef. So, but that being said, team, Carlos, I'll let you kind of promote the rolling competition, and why don't you also show that promo video so folks get an idea of what they got to look forward to.
Tampa Bay, are you ready for the hottest rolling competition of the year? Suncoast Normal presents the best blunt in the Bay 4. Saturday, April 12th, 2025, at the Dignitary Cafe located at 4817 Southwest Shore Boulevard in Tampa, Florida. Think you can roll with the best? Put your skills to the test in individual and team competitions. Limited judge spots available. Be one of the few to decide who rolls the ultimate blunt. VIP experience sponsored by Cushy Pies. Taste. Live vacay. Great vibes, live music, and the dopest community in the Bay. Don't miss your chance to crown the best blunt roller in the Bay. Get your tickets now at suncoastnormal.org.
So I know,
was that a mechanical voice or was that Bowser from Shana Now doing the voice?
I know everybody's concerned. Okay, I know everybody's like, oh, I can't get into the rolling contest, the Suncoast Normal rolling contest, because Carlos is deputy director of Suncoast Normal, and if Carlos is deputy director of Suncoast Normal, then he'd be rolling blunts, and I can't go up against his blunt rolling skills because he's the best blunt roller that ever lived. I know that's the line of reasoning that all of you guys are following, but I'm here to tell you, don't worry. I disqualified myself from the blunt rolling competition, right? I know that people would not join if I was in, and it'd be a conflict of interest. Let's be honest. It'd be a conflict of interest if I was in there. So don't worry. The best blunt roller right now is Landra. This is Landra. She modeled for the competition, right? I do want to point out that she did roll that blunt that she's holding there. So you got a fighting chance if you think you're the best blunt roller in the Bay and want to go up against Landra to prove it, right? You think you can win, Gary?
Well, I couldn't win, but I can tell you that, yeah, you would definitely be a ringer because I know as Cuban, you are practically inherently able to roll the best cigars using tobacco leaves with your eyes closed.
Well, believe it or not, I can't roll a cigar, but I can roll a blunt. No problem.
Your ancestors would not be proud.
I don't say anything racist against you, Gary. Like, why you say racist things about me?
Because I can.
All right, so there's a lot going on in this competition. The individual competition, that's if you just want to enter by yourself, right? that's endurance, speed, and style. So like they'll be around for endurance, meaning how many blunts can you roll in a certain amount of time. Speed, how fast can you roll a blunt, right? And style, like what can you do? Like show us what you can do. Then our team competition, that's a relay roll. So like you'll see how many, I believe that's how many blunts you can roll yourself. Like, does that make sense? Like how many blunts the team can roll in a certain amount of time. Long burn, how long will your blunt burn? And the hitch up, which I believe is everybody, it's one blunt for the whole team. Everybody's got to visit the blunt. Everybody's got to put their own thing on there, right? So April 12th, check it out, Dignitary Cafe. We typically only do these at the Chillum backyard, so that we're going out, we're into the community with the blunt rolling contest, teaming up with Dignitary Cafe and Ian Beckles over there. And it's going to be good. The blunt rolling contest is going to be in air conditioning this year. So that'd be fun.
And if you are not rolling, you're more than happy to come over here and cheer for an individual or a team, because I'm certain that makes it just more fun.
Oh, and even more, good point, Gary, even more fun. There are a limited amount of judges tickets available. So if you don't want to watch, you don't want to roll, you just want to smoke, be a judge.
It is also a party.
And
Just saying.
I think we did a good job promoting the blunt rolling contest, Gare Bear.
Absolutely.
I think all we got to do now is promote next week's show.
Tell your friends. Yes, next week we have Gabe Valamont, who is the person running against Jimmy Petronas for Matt Gates' seat in the Pensacola area or District 1. And if I could say anything we need to do right now, and that is we need to fix Congress. And that, by that saying, make it a little bit more bipartisan and a little bit less being run by the invertebrates of the GOP. And I'm saying that with love, because I know a lot of these guys have the gumption and the intelligence to do the right thing, and they're not doing it. So we have to look to an opposition party to actually be an opposition party. So let's have that discussion. Let's see what kind of fresh blood we can get into Congress, and maybe give the Congress a boost, and talk to somebody who could possibly do it in, of all places, District 1, which is deep red Pensacola. We'll find out.
So anything else, Gare Bear? How are you doing?
I think we're good at this point in time. Well, we're not good. I mean, we're looking down the nose of apocalypse right now with Social Security, Medicaid, and things of that sort. Something that I have a lot of concerns about. I was on the phone with Social Security the other day because I still haven't gotten my drug benefits fixed as far as Part D is concerned, and I was on hold for 3 hours because they closed down the physical place where I could go and talk to them. So now I got to be on the phone for 3 hours, and they're thinking of shutting down the phone service as well. So that's keeping me up at night. So luckily, I have something to help me sleep.
Is it weed? It's weed.
Good day, sir.
And a good day to you, sir.
All righty. Have a good week, guys. We'll see you next week on the rotation.
Bye.
Peace out.